Welcome back for the sixth and final installment for Writing Wednesdays, featuring me, William Galaini. Now, this last one is pretty important if you are looking to make a career as a writer, and it will have very little to do with writing. It'll deal with a very big periphery topic, and that is networking and you being out there and just being a person. Now, of course, you already know how to be a person to at least some extent, but you are now going to have to, let's put it this way, the old days of the reclusive writer living in a townhome on the corner, the Finding Forrester, J.D. Salinger crawling out from a hole to sue someone kind of thing, that's over. You cannot be an aloof, reclusive writer anymore unless you are so brilliant that you would never bother clicking on any video on YouTube on how to write. So if you're like me, you're just a regular person, and this is your career, and you're focusing on your skill set, we're going to talk about the mistakes I made, the successes I had, many of which were accidental, and how to be flexible, especially in this bizarre landscape that is professional narrative designers and writers. So when I say gig, sometimes as writers we become contract writers working either as ghostwriters or producing copy, etc., or even if we're lucky enough, producing entries into journals and magazines and things of that nature. Sometimes we're hired into a larger franchise to continue novelizations of other properties, things of that nature. But a lot of times we are sitting at a booth trying to make eye contact with people walking by who don't care to convince them to not just spend $15 on a book of ours, but to additionally spend 8 hours of their personal time to absorb that book. The cost of everything we're selling isn't just dollars, it's time. Some people will buy a book out of pity, but by and large, whenever you're selling a book, understand that you are also devouring a person's time. And they understand this too. Not just talking to you, but also the time in reading the product which you produce. So, with that said, a gig is when you show up to a panel, you show up to a book signing, you do a class that you have the opportunity to sell your book. For instance, this for me is a gig. The library was kind enough to bring me in and have me do these videos in the hopes that not only will it help my reputation in standing with the library itself, but also my audience members might connect with me out there, and then maybe they can look into getting my books. So this is a gig. You do not say no to gigs. If they fit into your time, you will do them. Sometimes they're digital like this, other times they are in person. Never are gigs cool like this. I always dreamed of sitting in a panel with a bunch of other brilliant writers, and I was just going to soak up their skills and talent, and I would be in front of an audience and they would ask me questions and I'll be like, well, yes, of course, while smoking on my pipe, impressing everyone. No. So if you have that desire or illusion, dispel it. Get rid of it. Gigs are going to be sweaty, gross, under the hot sun. You will spend $400 setting up a table, getting product, and driving there, and you'll sell 2 copies of a book, and you will cry in the shower. But that's just how it is. I'm going to tell you why you're going to stick with it. But yes, the long and short is, a gig is where you have the opportunity as a writer to show up and just be yourself and try and connect with any audience members. Now, few places are going to help you more in regards to connecting to your audience and generating sales and a local presence than your local bookstores. Whereas Barnes & Noble, each individual Barnes & Noble has a location on their website you can go to contact the store and try and set up a signing. I strongly recommend smaller bookstores. They're more prone to purchase and give you direct feedback as to the sales of your books. They are a more intimate setting, and if you help them, they will help you. Local bookstores are fantastic, especially if you write local works. A lot of writers write about the towns they live in. They might do historical work about the mill down on the river, or they might write a romance about, the coffee shop that they used to work at as a kid. All of these do very well. And for instance, here I am in front of Prospero's in Manassas. Now, every weekend we could set up a booth or a table out front. This was one of their Fridays. I think they called it First Friday, where people would come and go all throughout Manassas to shop. And you notice the bribery to the left there, gummy bears. And I also had a contest where if you beat me at a game called Timeline, where you arrange events in chronological order, you get a free copy of my book. So little things like that to draw in and engage people as they go by. Having an adorable son never hurts, especially if he is particularly funny. Uh, Kids make great props. Yes, I tell him that. I call him both my prop and my favorite tax deduction. But just be engaging. Sit there, make eye contact. Do not do a book table presentation and sit and read. Don't look at your phone. Also, try your best not to be soaked up with a singular individual. Do your best to acknowledge everyone who comes by. Ask them what they like to read. Some people would come by and look at my books and say, oh, science fiction fantasy isn't really my thing. Oh, well, what is your thing? And luckily, you will be well enough read as a professional writer to where you can make suggestions. Oh, have you read, oh, you like historical fiction? Have you read Sarum? I never read Ruska. How was that? Ask them questions. Learn about your audience, even if they may not necessarily be your target audience. If they're a reader, if they're a human, if they're bipedal, they're potentially an audience member for you. So, never dismiss anyone. Always sit there, be friendly, be engaging, and promote the bookstore as well as best you can, because in that bookstore, they will also be selling your book. Prospero sadly closed during COVID, but they were a consistent revenue source. I enjoyed getting the checks from my stuff selling through them. Please establish these long-term relationships with bookstores and owners. It is very healthy for them. You don't get to complain about Amazon soaking up everything business-wise unless you really support your local bookstores, because they will help promote you and push you as much as possible. As I've hinted at before, the internet, of course, is another layer of our reality that we must adhere to and acknowledge. And thankfully, one of the best things to come out of this internet, as my grandmother says, is the arrival of a lot of small subgroups that represent people's niche interests. I saw it initially with Prodigy and with CompuServe, and even with Facebook now and Twitter, etc. There are hashtags, groups, Reddit channels dedicated to very specific things that people like. So you can go into these groups and find, say, science fiction group might be a bit broad, but you can do a science fiction alternate history group. And now you're getting a bit more specific. If you look at the book you wrote, you're like, hey, I did write a science fiction alternate history where Abraham Lincoln actually was a vampire hunter. Now, of course, we know of this book, but that is a thing where people insert supernatural elements into history. And there are entire Reddits, entire groups online dedicated to this. If you become an active voice in those discussions, a lot of times people will consider looking at what it is you have to offer the actual body of work, your book. Show off your cover. I would strongly recommend against you kicking down the door and saying, hey, buy my book. Do not come in with a sales pitch. That almost never works. I would suggest you joining the community politely and easing into it and seeing what they like, seeing what they don't like, and you'll learn how to improve your work, as well as mentioning and providing what you have to offer. Now, with the internet, of course, you're going to find some very strange fringe corners. Don't get caught up in long conversations or hostile or toxic conversations that will not yield readership or meaningful feedback for you. Long and short of it is, the downside of the internet is that everyone's hot take and worthless opinion can be fired out at the same volume on the same bullhorn. Never engage with people who are going to be a waste of your time. And never respond to reviews that are negative of your work. Listen to it. If it's legit, absorb it and learn from it. But if someone just hates your book, let them hate your book. You're not going to argue them into liking it. So, utilize best practices for safe online usage, but you definitely need to be online. Conventions are the most expensive thing for you to do as a professional writer when it comes to promoting your work. But they are by far the most fun and most rewarding, and they yield the best results as far as readership and especially aggregating emails for that all-important email list you're going to have. Here I am at DragonCon, and while DragonCon is a tabletop gaming convention, because I'm a narrative designer, I do narrative work within the field, but also I got to cross-promote a lot of my novels, meet a lot of great people, including that lovely little puppet there, and interact with peers on my same professional career track, as well as people who are stuck on the same professional level that I am. And be sure to go outside of your particular track a little bit. Here I am with Bruce Bernisi, who's a magnificent artist. He let me hang out with him for a while, and I got to meet a lot of his audience members and pick up on his promotional tricks, how he presented his material, how he negotiated contracts, things of that nature. So I learned a lot from him. If you can, at any of these conventions, get on a panel. Here I am moderating a panel of some industry titans. While I myself am not nearly as important as the four people to my left in this particular venue, it was great just working with them, getting to know them, and asking them meaningful questions for the sake of an audience. Anything that gets you in front of people, practicing your public speech, is vital. Even if it doesn't yield any direct sales, it trains you. You become better at interacting with people and audience members, especially in person. This is incredibly important because as a writer, you are also a brand, and that brand follows your name or pen name. Make sure to maintain meaningfully your brand. Maintain a good reputation. Never openly complain, especially to your readership, because complaints don't go down a chain of command, as it were. It doesn't, they go up. So if you're going to complain, you go to your publisher, you go to your agents, you go to your publicist. Do not bother your readership with these things. They don't need it, and they can go elsewhere and not have to worry about it. Also, this may sound odd, but bathe. These conventions can get pretty rank, and about the third day, you're living off the floor in a hotel room with 8 other people, and you're pretty much operating on breakfast, cereal, and alcohol. So make sure you bathe and take care of yourself. And unfortunately, sometimes these conventions, I've been to a few, turn out to be ghost towns. You might have been duped. They might have lied about the turnout. They may have hit during really bad weather, or, it could be the starting of a pandemic that's just striking. All kinds of things can happen. Even if it's a ghost town, what few people arrive, make sure their experience is the best you can provide. Try and give them a great experience and help them remember you when it comes time for them to spend a little bit of money and a lot of time. Make yourself available. There's always a shower for you to cry in later. So again, conventions are really important. So, in conclusion, get on a first name basis with every bookstore owner that you can find. Check out places like Barnes & Noble for any particular signing opportunities you might get into. Hit your local conventions. Join Facebook groups, Reddit groups, and other places where people get together in the genre that you produce. and be personable. Do not be mired in toxicity. Feel free to decompress and cry in the shower whenever you need to. Don't expect people to eat your product right out of your hand, and go in it for the long haul. This is not a short-term thing. You will be doing this for a decade before you start seeing a return. On average, writers need to produce 7 novels before they're even selling copies on a regular basis. I've gone months with selling 1 or 2 copies. I've had better months, but sometimes those are the breaks. Even Stephen King wrote about his books bombing on occasion. Sometimes we just, there's no wind. We hit the doldrums. We sit there and wait. That's just how this is. But while you're waiting, you can always be planning for the next gig. Thank you very much. I'm William Galaini. That's me. Feel free to hit my site, join my email. I give away free short stories all the time through my email every quarter. And please go to the library. Check out my stuff either through the library itself or through the digital aspects of the library. I'm on audiobook, digital, and physical copies of stuff. So this is what you should do. Get out there, see how these gigs work, get a feel for it. You'll love it. You will.